What's up, guys? So I know I look a little rough. Usually when I'm making these videos, it comes like either right before or after I've worked out, because usually that's when I have like a slot of time to do these videos. Usually after I worked out. That's why I look like I'm dressed very casually. But I have, some more content coming for you guys. I want to show you some of my training, and I'm completely open to criticism. You can roast me and tell me my martial arts is crap, whatever, or give me some pointers, or give me some kudos. It's all good to me. I'm completely humble when it comes to my martial arts. That's why I never consider myself an expert. Not just from the fact I don't have certification in any particular art, although I've been practicing for over 30 years. It's just that um, I feel uncomfortable calling myself an expert because I feel like so much that I don't know. And even within the styles that I have a lot of background in, it always seems like there's something new that I need to learn. So, it, especially in Jeet Kune Do and Muay Thai and Salat, Kali, Taekwondo, I'll watch other people's content and be like, damn, I didn't know that. And I'll incorporate it into my training, or at least I'll test it out and see if see how it works for me. But yeah, um, I have some of that content coming. I just haven't done it yet because I haven't been able to produce it at the quality that I think would be worth watching. So I know I've talked about this long time ago, but I haven't forgotten, guys. I still plan on showing you some of my training. I'll probably do uh one or two videos showing me doing some shadow kickboxing rather, and some sparring when I can get one of my homeboys to be able to have time to film with me. Also, I'm going to do some more Philippine stuff. Um, and I have some more interviews planned. I've only posted one so far with me and Marie from the Glam Lux channel, but I have other stuff coming with some other ladies, and maybe some other stuff with uh, people like Mrs. Contrarian and others walking around and doing stuff in the Philippines that you guys may not normally see unless you've been there yourself. Plus, she's a travel buff, so she's been to almost every province in the Philippines so far. So she can literally tell you just about anything going on in the Philippines. All right, so got more stuff like that planned. All right, but this video is going to be on some nerdy stuff because this is actually my favorite subject of all, aside from martial arts. But I don't do it too much just because I know that I don't want people's eyes to cross. And even when I do it, I dumb it down pretty considerably. I try not to use too much jargon, and when I do, I try to define it, but I don't like defining stuff because it'll make the video much longer. So here we go. As I've mentioned in several previous nerdy videos, I'm a huge advocate of people having a healthy sense of skepticism. But I think I should break down skepticism a little bit more. The type of skepticism I'm referring to is a more of an everyday or scientific skepticism. But skepticism has a long tradition within philosophy. And so I'm going to tackle philosophical skepticism versus scientific skepticism, which is more of a methodology, whereas philosophical skepticism is more of an actual like philosophical view or theory or model, whatever you want to call it. And this dates all the way back to ancient times. I'm going to save you the history lesson. But like I said, normally when people today talk about skepticism, they're talking about skepticism of everyday claims, of within a particular domain, say like of the paranormal or pseudoscientific, stuff like that. And I'm a complete advocate of that. I'm a proponent of scientific skepticism, and I subscribe to the uh, CSI or Psi Committee for Skeptical Inquiry, which publishes the Skeptical Inquirer magazine. Many of the Psi fellows are pretty huge public intellectuals and academics like Neil deGrasse Tyson, Steven Pinker, Richard Dawkins. The list goes on. The late great uh, Randy, the amazing Randy, who was a magician and skeptic, who was one of the co-founders of Psi, was one of their luminous fellows, as was Carl Sagan, people like that. So that kind of gives you a hint of that caliber of stuff that they do. And they advocate for scientific skepticism. Many of them aren't even familiar with philosophical skepticism and why it's so problematic. Um, and there are some philosophers that are Psi fellows as well. They aren't advocates of philosophical skepticism either, and I'm going to say why. Um, but yeah, that I'm completely for that. I'm an advocate of scientific skepticism in that vein, which is more as a methodology of testing claims about paranormal, pseudoscientific claims, um, dubious political claims, and so on. All right. I'm a complete advocate of that, and I think you guys should be as well. That's what I've been advocating in previous videos. But I'm going to contrast that with philosophical skepticism, which is both has its moderate and radical versions. The Psi skepticism advocated by CSI or Psi Committee for Skeptical Inquiry is of the moderate sort of skepticism, which treats it more as a methodology. But the philosophical skepticism, the historical vein of it at least, has been a radical skepticism. Um, you may be familiar with a philosopher like David Hume, who was a skeptic, but his skepticism was nuanced. He was a philosophical skeptic, but it wasn't. But he rejected the radical forms that I'm going to um, identify here. So I don't know what to really call Humean skepticism other than it's its own thing, which kind of takes elements from philosophical skepticism, which is the belief that we have no knowledge, or at least that we can't justify having that knowledge, with the everyday skepticism of the paranormal and religious that Humean skepticism is big on doing. So on one end, you have the academic, or sometimes call it Cartesian skepticism, because of Descartes, Rene Descartes, the famous philosopher that most people misquote as saying, um, "I think, therefore I exist," or which is not exactly what he said, but that's a topic for another day. But in any case, his sort of uh, method of doubting every claim that couldn't be justified is sometimes referred to as Cartesian skepticism, but it dates all the way back to the ancient Greeks, and it's called academic skepticism because it came out of Plato's Academy. Some of the thought leaders of that time, adopted this philosophical skepticism that basically most of our claims cannot be justified, or we just don't have knowledge. Now, they weren't absolute in that, but it's still radical because it's basically saying pretty much everything we we think is unjustified, and really can't say we know anything. But it's not absolute because they did accept, at least on the face of it, that there are certain beliefs that are justified or must be true, namely their own argument, which which is tendentious, as well as I guess certain things that we have to get along with to not be just completely cuckoo, such as causation. Like we know in philosophy nowadays that there's really no there's really no argument for causation that doesn't beg the question itself, because any sort of claim for it, you know, will assume that there's causation. And I'm not going to get too deep in that, but I will say that some religious folks may find that good, because people can say that there is, at the end of the causal chain of events, some uncaused cause. I can't argue with that. I can't argue against that. There probably is at some point some uncaused cause. Although we don't have to accept that either. We can just accept it as a ad infinitum, if a chain of causal events from that that never had a beginning, at least conceptually. Physically, I don't know. Physically, I think, yeah, they might be right. There's an uncaused cause at some point, but conceptually, there's no reason to believe that there is, at some point, an uncaused cause. However, religious people can say, "Aha, there's an uncaused cause, therefore, there God exists." But that's a huge leap to say there's an uncaused cause and to then say it's some sort of intentional psychological being like a god is not justified. Um, for some of us, we can just simply say if there is an uncaused cause, that's simply just the laws of physics. The laws of science. And if someone is super nerdy, they might even go beyond that, saying it's not the laws of physics, but the laws of information theory. That's a whole topic I'm not getting into. Okay. But suffice to say, some people think the laws of physics really reduce down to laws of information. Okay, whatever. Now, we also got to deal with the problem of induction, similar to the problem of causation. So we now know in philosophy there's no argument for induction or inductive inference that doesn't also utilize inductive inference in that very argument. So, but I mean, for an academic skeptic, they'll just have to get along with the fact that we'll just have to accept these things prima facie, um, to get along with our everyday, you know, uh, lives. However, there's a more extreme vein of philosophical skepticism, the Perseonian skeptics. Uh, this was, I think, first talked about by Sextus Empiricus, the Roman philosopher and emperor. So yes, he was a true philosopher king. If people are familiar with that term from, um, Plato, everything is a footnote to Plato. But anyway, um, they were more radical, and they believe there is no knowledge. They were absolute skeptics, way more so than the academic skeptics. So whereas the academic skeptic will at least want you to accept their argument on the face of it, and maybe a few other claims, just so that we're not spinning our wheels here. The Peronian skeptics were absolute and just said no beliefs are justified. We have no knowledge, including our own claims. Like, you shouldn't accept ours either. Like, that's completely untenable. Okay, so for the uninitiated, the history of philosophy, for the most part, at least Western philosophy, has pretty much been a war between philosophers and philosophical skeptics, which is to say that we have knowledge, to bold facedly go in front of these skeptics with these pretty tight arguments that they've constructed, which I'm not going to get into the specifics of their arguments, but you get a gist that it's hard to like directly fight them on these arguments. But the philosopher is it's like the Jedi standing before the Sith, trying to tell them, well, yes, we know that knowledge is tentative and that we may not have justification for many of these claims, but we still have knowledge. There's been common sense arguments against skepticism by folks who might say, well, here I see I have a hand. Here I see I have another hand. So I know that there's at least two things that exist in the world, namely my hands. So this isn't a knockdown, dragged out argument that may convince the skeptic, but it's a start. The more important thing is that, as I kind of hinted just before with the Perseonian skeptics, is that if their argument that we can't justify having knowledge of anything is valid and sound, then they owe us a special argument to show why we should accept their beliefs, namely that there aren't any there aren't any justified knowledge claims when their arguments suffer from the same flaws as every other argument that they're challenging. Now, at least, like I said, the academic skeptics will at least say that, okay, well, we have to say that there's some knowledge out there. They're just very limited in saying what those are, other than the things that we need to get along with actually providing that very argument. But it's a bit of special pleading on their part. At least the Peronians are just, at least the Peronian skeptics are just more honest in saying, yeah, don't accept our beliefs either. I find that more honest, but it's untenable. So either one, the academic skeptics or the Peronian skeptics, it's not a good way to look at how to accept or believe things. Another problem is that they both implicitly accepted a theory of knowledge on justification. A lot of our beliefs probably cannot be justified. They're right about that. However, justification is not the end all be all in a theory of knowledge. A lot of contemporary philosophers have ditched it in favor of other theories of knowledge. One of the most popular, at least when I was still studying, was a reliabilist theory of knowledge. So reliabilist claims opposed to justified claims is less contentious, let's say. So I know I'm going to make eyes cross, if I haven't already, with defining the two different philosophical veins of skepticism. But to say that a belief is a knowledge claim under the reliabilist theory of knowledge is to say, well, hey, one, that belief is true. Two, I believe that it's true. Three, that belief tracks reality, at least in all relevant situations. And four, it doesn't have any known defeaters to that claim. And that's good enough, because we can't always justify every claim, but that doesn't mean that we cannot claim that we cannot therefore assert that such claims aren't knowledge. Like I said, to completely ditch the concept of causation would be just absurd, as would be inductive inference. All right, so those were the examples I gave. And I'm I wanted to jump back on that. So again, I was once a philosophical skeptic. I've learned better through taking a course in epistemology and some other stuff. Um, but I still advocate for the everyday skepticism of rejecting paranormal claims, religious claims, um, claims that lack any rational grounds, claims that are just they trigger your logical intuitions, your logical sense, like just like you have, just like Peter Parker or Miles Morales or Gwen Stacy have their spidey sense. We have a little logical sense. We sometimes it's more tweaked in some folks than others through taking formal logic and taking critical thinking courses and taking math and or being naturally just um, sharper people. But we all have them to some degree, and when something triggers that those logical intuitions that something is awry, that's a that's a good place to start to see if what someone is selling you is a bunch of bull, or if something you've always implicitly accepted from childhood is bull, which is especially stuff coming from your family, or coming from the religion you were brought up in, or certain societal beliefs that you were just force fed. So it's easier to check other people's claims. It's harder to check your own, but there's ways to do so. Like I said, taking critical thinking courses, either online or taking a formal course in school, as well as logic. But like I said, everyone should have a healthy sense of skepticism and cynicism, but it shouldn't be taken so far to the philosophical extent where you just doubt that most knowledge can be justified at all, or that we just simply don't have knowledge. That's an absurd claim that only philosophers could indulge in. And they pride themselves in indulging in all sorts of absurd things, which I kind of love, because in philosophy it's not how absurd a claim is whether you can defend it, whether you can rationally defend and support that claim. If you can. But hey guys, I know this ran pretty long, so I just wanted to just talk about philosophical skepticism versus scientific skepticism, and tell you why you should reject the former, why you should embrace the latter. Okay, and if you want to get more into that sort of scientific skepticism, like I said, Skeptical Inquirer magazine is a good place to start. They're also on Facebook. Their umbrella company is CFI, Center for Inquiry, which houses Psi or CSI and some other groups under their one umbrella organization. Okay, but signing off here, too long, I know. I'm sorry, but it's a nerdy topic that I love, and I'm just a contrarian.